I've got 10 tips for you to get better interviews. And if you need to wrangle your guests or manage them a little bit, if you've ever had a hard guest, maybe they talk too much, maybe they don't talk enough, maybe they're just boring, right? Or maybe it's just not going like you expected. These tips will help you regardless of the type of guest you have, but also will fix that problem of how you manage a guest that is difficult in some form or fashion. So let's dig in. I actually have more than 10 tips for you. So let's talk about it. So you obviously have to prepare ahead of time if you are going to have an interview. And the amount that you prep is going to rely on your comfortable level, your level of comfort, as well as the guests, right? So sometimes you actually may wind up with a guest that doesn't want a list of questions, but sometimes your guest may want a list of questions. It depends on who you're interviewing and how well they do at interviews, how accustomed they are to it. So you need to understand that about your guest. You can have a format that you follow, right? And you're educating them beforehand when you're booking them or when you have booked them. You've got to educate them, and that education process can look very simple. It doesn't have to be a big book, because you actually don't want a big book of instructions for your guest. You really need to keep it simple for them. Otherwise, they may not make it all the way through and they'll miss important things, right? So you want to educate them. What are you hoping to accomplish inside of this interview? For me, my education process is pretty simple. I deal with most of my interview guests are people who are used to being on camera and being interviewed, and so it's a very easy process. But my education process goes something like, hey, this is a totally casual conversation. Make sure, we're just having fun, right? That's kind of like that type of flow is what I'm looking for in my guests. So you need to prepare and know what you want. Do you want it to feel like an interview, or do you want it to feel like a casual hangout of friends just having a great conversation? You need to identify that for yourself first, and that depends on your brand. My brand is fun, and we have a lot of fun here, and we like to goof off, right? I need to educate them that there's a countdown timer, and by the way, you're going to be dancing during my countdown timer, right? And so we have that conversation ahead of time. So always be upfront with what you're expecting. You also want to involve your viewers in the upcoming interview. Get them participating in posting questions beforehand, or what do you want to hear about from your viewers? This will also enable you to deliver a better interview so that you have content that your audience is wanting to hear, right? So once you do that, you're going to move into the tech check. And by the way, I have a full video on the tech side of things in running guests and making that more professional. Things like framing and what you talk about in the tech check, and make sure that you are booking them early for a tech check, especially if it's a live interview, right? So I have a whole video that's all about that. Today we're staying focused on tips, exactly, right? So we're again educating them. Again, okay? So you've done that through email already. Now is the time to set the stage, okay? And this tech check is your perfect opportunity to identify what type of guest you have, because you may not know that ahead of time. Now is the time to educate them again. And my tech check, we're goofing off, we're having fun, and I slip in conversations about what I want to accomplish during the interview, right? And so I will make sure that they have a solid understanding of it, but I don't make it a very formal thing. And the reason I don't do that is because it sets the tone for the type of conversation that I want to have during the interview. And that's really important. Setting that stage ahead of time and getting them into the right flow while you're in tech check is going to drastically change the results of the interview itself. So again, I'm having that conversation with them that I want it to just be a conversation. So I'm having a conversation with them ahead of time. We talk about, whatever, that is relevant to them. It's just some friendly banter back and forth, right? Getting them to relax. And if you have a guest that doesn't feel relaxed in tech check, now is your time to make sure that you are taking control and setting their stage. So you can work with them in that tech check, right? You have to be in control. You are the controller of the interview. And most people go wrong by not stepping into that role mentally with their brain, right? So if you have somebody who's like not really having a conversation with you, really kind of feeling nervous, then I just welcome them to be more at ease. And you have to be good at people wrangling, right? You have to be good with people in order to do that. And this is a skill that you can get get good at, right? You can learn how to be good with people. But again, it's about getting them to talk freely and asking them about themselves, asking them about their kids, asking them about a pet, right? Having a starter list of conversation starters, really, a list of conversation starters will help you ease them into that if you are not really skilled at that just yet. So take control and be in control throughout the interview. And that brings us to during the interview itself is guiding them through that process. So, a good interviewer, which is who you are going to be, is going to guide the conversation. Now, I always have a list of questions, but I listen, right? So prepare a list of questions, prepare the conversation that you want to have, but listen to what they're saying and allow yourself to go with that flow. So either two situations are going to happen. One, you're going to hear something that's not on your list. Do not let that go. If somebody drops a knowledge bomb or says something that you can take in a completely different direction that you know is going to be good for your audience in that moment, then go there, right? Don't get so hung up on the list of questions that you forget or that you just pass by a perfect opportunity for a deeper conversation or digging into that knowledge bomb even better, right? So go with that flow, listen, but also keep it on track, right? There's a balancing act that goes along with guiding them, keeping it on track, and going with the flow. And that comes with practice and time. But being conscious of those things will help you in the moment to learn how to do that. Right. So we've got an end goal that we're trying to reach. We've got somewhere we're going with that interview. So you can take little squirrel moments, but always bring them back. Now, let's talk about problem guests. Problem guests look like somebody who's boring or not talking or not really answering your questions, like really yes or no. Like you're asking a question and they come back with, yep, no, not really. That's like pulling teeth. Or your problem guest might talk too much. Have you ever had that? Right? And that is going to both of them, the person who isn't talking very much, a lot of that's going to happen in the tech check. That's because they're not comfortable. So getting them comfortable during that tech check is going to lessen your chances of having that issue. If they talk too much, remember you are in control. And a great way to interrupt them, because sometimes you have to interrupt a guest if they're not providing the right information or if they're going off track too much and it's not going to be valuable to your audience, or if, they're just never letting this be a conversation. It's just a one-sided boom, right? So you do have to interrupt your guests. And the way you do that is by providing a recap. You can, so if somebody is like just talking, like Sarah said earlier, they're never taking a breath, or their breaths are in the middle of a sentence, you can actually get really good at interrupting by saying, so what I hear you saying is that you believe XYZ. That's really interesting, and moving them along to the next question, right? So recapping can help you guide that conversation, interrupt that flow that's not working, and move them into that next situation or question. But recaps don't feel rude because, one, to the guest, it shows them that you're listening to them. And for the audience, it's recapping what they just said so that there's more value perceived in that, right? So yeah, and then you can also just interrupt them, right? You don't have to recap it. You can just interrupt them by saying, by asking your next question. There's some balance to making that actually work well, right? Or you can interrupt with saying, not recapping, but you can be like, that's a really interesting point. Next question, right? Or, I mean, there's so many different ways to do it, but get good at interrupting. That is how you make a good interview, is by taking control of that situation and leading and guiding through that conversation. All right, next up, afterwards, during, after you stop going live or after the recording is done, be sure to thank them, of course. But when you have interviews, you need to follow up with them. Follow up with a handwritten note or an email, or a follow-up question of some kind, or just a thank you is always really good to do. And the thing that most people miss out on doing when it comes to interviews is that you don't keep that relationship going. So put it in your calendar if you have to, but follow up and keep the relationship open and there with you, right? So that you have that resource later. And you want to do that by just asking how, their kid is, or you can just start random conversations based on maybe some of the conversations that you had during Tech Check, right? Just follow up and be human with that interview guest. That way it's not a one and done deal, and your relationship stays afterwards, and you're not asking them for anything during that process, right? One day later, 2 years from now, you may need them again, or you may want, maybe not if they weren't a great guest, but there may be something else that you want to do with them later. So think about that ahead of time and give and offer your help in certain circumstances where you're not asking for anything in return. Okay, so those are, I think, 13 tips actually, not just 10. And we're gonna move into the Q&A for the live viewers. But if you want to learn about the tech side of it, go ahead and watch this video where we dive into helping you look more professional with interviews and all of the tech that goes behind that.